The galaxy had always been full of danger, but for thousands of years, no species caused more fear than the ones who called themselves the Alphas. They were tall, powerful, and born for war. Their bodies were covered in thick armor-like skin. Their eyes glowed red in the dark, and their claws could tear through steel. Every child in the galaxy grew up hearing stories of them, the monsters who conquered planets and left behind only ashes. The Alphas believed they were chosen to rule. They saw every other race as weak, soft, and unworthy of survival. When they marched into a system, no one resisted. Entire worlds lowered their flags without firing a single shot. It was easier to surrender than to fight, because fighting the Alphas always ended in the same way: mass graves and burning skies. Their warships were nightmares of black metal, shaped like predators ready to strike. They carried fleets so large they could block out the stars. When the Alphas arrived, people whispered, "The night has fallen." And soon after, screams followed. The galaxy called them Alpha because they always believed they were the first, the strongest, the hunters at the top of the chain. And maybe they were, until the day they heard a new name whispered across the stars: humans. The first time the Alphas heard about Earth, they laughed. Reports described humans as small, fragile creatures who lived on a blue and green world. They had no claws, no thick hides, no glowing eyes. Their weapons were dangerous, but nothing compared to Alpha technology. Their bodies could be broken, their bones crushed. To the Alphas, humans were nothing but prey waiting to be harvested. In their war councils, Alpha generals mocked the idea of humans resisting. "Another soft race," they said. "We will crush them in days." They had faced many species before, and all had fallen. Why would this time be any different? But there were whispers, quiet warnings from the shadows of conquered worlds. A few alien traders who had visited Earth carried strange stories. They spoke of human eyes, eyes that did not bow even in the face of fear. They spoke of a history filled with wars, rebellions, and survival against impossible odds. One alien prisoner, before being silenced forever, whispered to an Alpha guard, "Be careful. The humans bleed, but they do not break." The Alphas ignored these warnings. They were too proud, too confident. Pride had carried them through centuries of victory, and it blinded them now. Soon the Alpha fleets prepared for war. Their ships gathered at the edge of human space, ready to descend upon Earth. They had done this countless times before, and they expected it would end the same way. Fire raining from the skies, cities falling, billions kneeling. Across the galaxy, other species watched. Some prayed for humanity, though they believed prayers would do nothing. Others waited for the inevitable, certain the Alphas would add Earth to their growing empire. To many, humans were still a mystery. Would they fight, or would they fall like all the rest? On Earth, leaders received the first warnings. Strange signals, broken messages from outposts near the edge of space. A name repeated again and again: Alpha Dominion. The news spread like wildfire. Some panicked, others refused to believe it. But in the silence of war rooms and bunkers, a grim truth became clear. War was coming. The Alphas sent their first message to Earth. It was short, brutal, and filled with arrogance. Kneel, submit, become ours or be erased. Many in the galaxy expected humans to surrender. After all, surrender was the only reason some species had survived. But the humans did not bow. Their reply was simple: "We will fight." The Alphas laughed. To them it was nothing but foolish courage. They would crush that spirit soon enough. But even as they laughed, a strange unease stirred in their ranks. It was small, like a shadow moving at the edge of vision, but it was there. Because deep down, the Alphas knew something they never wanted to admit. Every empire they had crushed before, every world they had enslaved, had at least shown fear. But these humans, they did not sound afraid. The invasion began. Alpha warships pierced the skies above Earth, their weapons glowing like burning suns. Cities shook as bombs fell. The ground split as buildings crumbled, and the world turned red with fire. The Alphas roared in victory, declaring themselves masters of another world. But beneath the smoke, beneath the rubble, a new sound began to rise. It was not the sound of surrender. It was the sound of voices whispering, uniting, growing stronger. A word passed through the ruins, carried by survivors, soldiers, and children alike: resistance. The Alphas had seen many worlds burn, but they had never seen what was about to come. For in their pride, they had made one fatal mistake. They thought humans were prey. They had no idea they had just awakened predators of a different kind. The first Alpha warships arrived like shadows blotting out the sun. Their black hulls shimmered with fire as they entered Earth's orbit, hundreds of ships moving in perfect formation. To those watching from the ground, it felt as if the sky itself was cracking open. People ran into the streets, pointing at the dark silhouettes above. Children cried, elders prayed, and soldiers gripped their weapons tighter. For many, it was the first time they had ever seen something so vast, so terrifying, so unstoppable. The Alphas had come with their usual arrogance. Their commanders believed Earth would fall within days. To them, this was not a war, only a harvest. From their flagships, they broadcast a single command across every radio, every television, every signal: submit or be erased. The world fell silent. Leaders met in hurried councils. Some wanted to surrender, others demanded to fight. Fear gnawed at them all. But one truth soon became clear: there would be no peace with the Alphas. To bow was to become slaves forever. To fight was to bleed, maybe to die. Yet humanity made its choice. The reply was sent, clear and sharp: we will not kneel. The Alphas laughed. On their command bridges, warriors pounded their chests and raised their weapons. To them, this was entertainment. Another weak race daring to resist, another lesson to teach. The first strikes came within hours. Alpha warships unleashed burning beams of plasma, tearing through Earth's defenses. Satellites melted, defense stations shattered, and the skies lit up like storms of fire. Cities trembled under the bombardment. Entire blocks vanished in explosions. The oceans boiled where the plasma fell. But humans did not run as easily as the Alphas expected. Firefighters pulled children out of collapsing buildings. Soldiers shot back even when their weapons barely scratched the black armor of the invaders. Civilians formed rescue lines, pulling the wounded from the rubble. Even in chaos, there was defiance. For the first time, Alpha soldiers set foot on Earth. They landed in towering dropships, their armored boots crushing the ground. Standing over 3 meters tall, their bodies gleamed with biometal plates. Their red eyes scanned the ruins with hunger. To them, humans looked small, soft, fragile. Many Alphas laughed as they charged forward. But laughter turned to silence when the first firefights began. In the streets of New York, human soldiers used guerrilla tactics. They hid inside collapsed buildings, sniped from rooftops, and planted explosives in sewer tunnels. Alpha warriors fell one after another, caught off guard by the humans' clever traps. In the forests of Eastern Europe, militias struck from the shadows, vanishing before the Alphas could retaliate. Even in defeat, humans made every battle costly. The Alphas had expected fear. Instead, they found rage. One Alpha commander reported back to his fleet: they fight like wounded animals, desperate, savage. They refuse to surrender. They make war of every street and every shadow. Still, the Alphas were confident. They had destroyed many cities already, and Earth's armies were bleeding. But even as they crushed defenses, unease spread through their ranks. Because the humans did something no other race had done before: strike back. The first counterattack came when a single human warship, thought to be crippled, broke through the Alpha blockade. Its captain refused to retreat. With engines burning and weapons failing, the ship rammed into an Alpha cruiser. The explosion lit the night sky, tearing the massive vessel in half. The galaxy watched in shock. From hidden satellites and secret transmissions, word spread quickly: a human ship destroyed an Alpha warship. It had never happened before. The Alphas tried to dismiss it as luck, an accident, but deep down they felt the first sting of doubt. On Earth, the resistance grew. Civilians who had never touched a weapon picked up rifles. Farmers turned tractors into armored vehicles. Engineers converted factories into weapon foundries. Humanity was changing fast. Every death fueled their fury. Every city lost only made them more determined. The Alphas underestimated the one thing that made humans different. Other species surrendered to save themselves. But humans fought not only for survival, they fought for each other, for family, for friends, for their home. In the ruins of a school, an Alpha patrol found words painted in blood on a wall: we bleed, we burn, but we do not bow. When that message reached Alpha Command, silence followed. Some laughed, but others did not. The phrase spread quickly, haunting them. For the first time in their long history of conquest, the Alphas began to wonder: had they chosen the wrong prey? The first contact was meant to be their victory march. Instead, it became a warning. The Alphas had come to Earth with arrogance, certain of their dominance. But what they found was something the galaxy had forgotten: humanity's fire rising from the ashes. And in the cold void of space, watching Earth burn yet refusing to kneel, the galaxy whispered a truth that even the Alphas feared. The humans will not yield. The Alphas believed victory was already theirs. Their fleets filled Earth's skies, their soldiers marched through burning cities, and their commanders roared with pride. To them, the humans were already broken, but they had not seen everything. Far beneath the ground, in secret bunkers and hidden tunnels, humans were preparing. Soldiers, scientists, and civilians worked side by side, building weapons out of scraps, programming hacked drones, and planning strikes where the enemy least expected. The Alphas thought humans were fragile, yet here they were, turning rubble into fortresses and broken machines into weapons. The first counterattack began on a night filled with smoke. An Alpha battleship, massive and terrifying, drifted above the Pacific Ocean. Its cannons glowed, preparing to fire on coastal cities. Inside, Alpha officers feasted and laughed, celebrating their easy conquest. They did not know that in the waters below something stirred. The submarine Leviathan, an old human war relic, crept through the dark waves. Its crew was small, tired and running low on supplies, but their eyes burned with determination. They had one chance, one shot to prove humanity was not finished. "Target locked," the captain whispered. His voice trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of history. The submarine fired. A torpedo shot through the ocean, striking the belly of the Alpha battleship. For a moment, silence followed. Then the explosion came. Fire ripped across the sky, tearing through alien steel. The massive ship groaned like a dying beast before splitting in half and falling into the ocean. The world held its breath. For the first time in living memory, an Alpha warship had been destroyed. Not by a fleet, not by another empire, but by humans. The news spread faster than fire. Across hidden channels, civilians whispered, "We struck them down." Resistance fighters raised their weapons higher, shouting, "We can fight back." Even in the ashes of ruined cities, survivors cheered, but the Alphas were not cheering. On their command ships, generals slammed their fists into iron tables. "Impossible," they roared. Yet the evidence was there, smoke rising from the ocean, wreckage of their great battleships sinking into the deep. Something sharp pierced their pride. For the first time, the hunters felt like prey. The counterattacks did not stop there. In the streets of Paris, resistance fighters lured Alpha patrols into narrow alleys, where hidden explosives turned stone walls into weapons. In the deserts of Africa, tribes united to strike at Alpha supply lines, ambushing convoys under the cover of night. In the forests of South America, guerrilla fighters set traps, striking fast and vanishing before the Alphas could respond. Everywhere the Alphas turned, humans were waiting. It was not just soldiers. Ordinary men and women, teachers, farmers, workers, joined the fight. They carried old rifles, sharpened farming tools, or sometimes nothing but fire in their hands. They were not trained, they were not perfect, but they fought with something the Alphas could not understand: hope. An Alpha officer, frustrated after losing 3 squads in one night, wrote in his report, "They do not fight with order. They fight with fury. They turn ruins into battlefields and shadows into soldiers. They are chaos itself." The galaxy was watching. Secret transmissions carried the stories of human defiance across the stars. Alien slaves chained in Alpha camps heard whispers, "The humans are fighting back." And for the first time in centuries, those slaves dared to dream of freedom. But humanity's victories came at a terrible cost. Every counterattack left cities in ruins, every strike demanded lives. The Alphas responded with greater fury, burning entire towns to the ground in revenge. For every Alpha ship destroyed, 10 human ships were lost. For every Alpha squad defeated, hundreds of humans bled. Yet, the humans did not stop. In the rubble of Tokyo, a child carved words into a wall with a broken piece of glass. "We are still here." That message spread like fire. It was painted on ruined buildings, scratched onto metal, whispered through radios. It became a banner for humanity's fight. The Alphas had expected an easy hunt. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a nightmare. Every step forward cost them blood. Every city they claimed turned into a battlefield they could not hold. And worse, the humans were learning. They studied Alpha weapons, hacked into their technology, and turned the enemy's tools against them. In secret labs, engineers worked day and night, whispering, "If we can kill one ship, we can kill more." The first counterattack was not just a strike, it was a signal. A signal to Earth, to the galaxy, and to the Alphas themselves. Humans would not go quietly. They would bleed. They would burn. But they would never kneel. The galaxy shivered as the truth became clear. This war would not end in days. It would not end in weeks. Humanity had made its choice. And the Alphas, for all their pride, had no idea what storm they had just awakened. The Alphas were used to open battles. They believed war was about marching armies, giant ships, and crushing force. That was how they had won for centuries: overwhelming strength, terrifying weapons, and fear that broke their enemies before the fight even began. But humans did not fight that way. When the Alphas marched into a ruined city, they found no armies waiting. Streets were empty, buildings silent. They thought the humans had fled. Then, without warning, explosions tore through their patrols. Hidden bombs in cars, traps buried under rubble, gunfire raining from rooftops. By the time the Alphas turned their weapons, the humans were gone. This was not war as the Alphas understood it. This was something darker. This was guerrilla war. In the forests of Canada, resistance fighters moved like ghosts. They knew every tree, every river, every cave. Alpha patrols entered the woods and never came back. Soldiers whispered about shadows watching them, about humans striking from nowhere and vanishing like smoke. In the deserts of the Middle East, sandstorms became allies. Human fighters used the storms to hide their movements, ambushing convoys, stealing supplies, and disappearing into the dunes. The Alphas called them phantoms of the sand, and even their toughest warriors began to fear the desert nights. In the tunnels beneath ruined cities, humans lived and fought like rats. The Alphas tried to flood the tunnels with fire, but humans always found new paths. They turned sewers into escape routes, abandoned stations into fortresses, and broken pipes into weapons. Every step the Alphas took was dangerous. Every corner could hide an enemy. Reports reached Alpha High Command. Their officers were furious. "This is not war," they shouted. "This is dishonor." But the results were undeniable. Squads were vanishing, supplies were stolen, morale was sinking. The Alphas had thought humans were fragile. Instead, they found humans to be relentless. A captured Alpha commander once confessed to his guards, "They fight like demons. They do not fear death. They use it as a weapon." The galaxy listened in silence. Stories of human resistance spread across hidden channels. Slaves on faraway planets whispered with hope, "The Alphas are bleeding." Still, the cost was high. For every Alpha squad destroyed, 100 humans died. Entire neighborhoods were reduced to ashes. Families were torn apart. Children learned to hide in silence as enemy boots thundered above them. But pain only hardened the humans. In South America, a village lost every home to Alpha fire. Yet the survivors did not flee. They built barricades from the ruins and armed themselves with scavenged weapons. When the Alphas returned expecting no resistance, the villagers fought with such fury that an entire squad was wiped out. Not a single villager survived, but the message was clear. Humans would rather die fighting than live as slaves. The Alphas could not understand this. Most races surrendered quickly to survive. But the humans, no matter how much they lost, kept rising again and again. A human child wrote on a wall in broken paint, "You may take our homes, but you will never take our fight." That message was found by an Alpha patrol. They mocked it at first, but later some admitted it haunted them. Because deep down they knew it was true. As weeks turned into months, the Alphas grew frustrated. They had the weapons, the fleets, the strength. But the humans controlled something more dangerous: the shadows. The Alphas never knew where the next attack would come from. A ruined hospital could hide snipers. A burning car could explode at the right moment. Even silence was a weapon. Soldiers grew paranoid, shooting at shadows, fearing every step. Human resistance groups began to connect with each other, forming networks across continents. They shared information, weapons, and courage. From the ashes of defeat, a new spirit rose, a spirit of unity. Humanity had never been fully united before. But now, under the weight of Alpha invasion, they stood together as one. The Alphas soon realized the greatest mistake of their campaign. By attacking Earth, they had not divided humans. They had forged them into something unbreakable. One Alpha general, after losing 3 cities in a week, snarled, They do not fight with honor. They fight with madness, but another officer whispered the truth. It is not madness. It is will. The shadows had become humanity's greatest weapon, and as the war dragged on, one thing became clear. The Alphas could conquer land, they could burn cities, they could slaughter millions, but they could never kill the human spirit hiding in the dark. The war had dragged on longer than the Alphas expected. When they first came to Earth, their commanders promised victory in days. Weeks passed, then months. The galaxy began to whisper, "The Alphas are struggling." It was true. Everywhere they marched, humans struck back. At first it was only small groups, shadows in the ruins. But now resistance was spreading like fire. What began as scattered guerrilla fighters was becoming something larger. An army of the desperate, the broken, and the unyielding. The Alphas destroyed cities, but from the ashes, survivors kept rising. They had expected humanity to break. Instead, the humans were growing stronger. In an underground base beneath the Rocky Mountains, leaders of different resistance groups gathered for the first time. Soldiers, civilians, engineers, and even children who had carried weapons in secret. They shared maps, plans, and weapons stolen from Alpha patrols. For the first time, the scattered pieces of humanity began to move as one. Their message was simple: we will fight together. The first sign of this new unity came in Europe. An Alpha fortress stood on the ruins of Berlin, its black towers glowing with red lights. For months, the Alphas had used it as a stronghold to control the region. But one night, the fortress shook with explosions. Human fighters had tunneled beneath it, planting bombs stolen from Alpha convoys. The towers collapsed in fire and resistance banners were raised above the ruins. The Alphas were stunned. Never in their history had their fortresses fallen to a lesser race. Reports spread quickly through their fleets. Soldiers who once mocked humans now spoke their name with unease. And the galaxy was watching. Across distant worlds, enslaved species listened to the secret transmissions from Earth. The humans fight still. They bleed, but they rise again. For those who lived under Alpha chains, hope began to stir. The Alphas, furious, tried to answer with greater force. They burned villages, destroyed entire forests, and turned oceans red with fire. They wanted to crush the spirit of humanity once and for all. But their cruelty only gave humans more reasons to resist. Every act of terror birthed 10 more fighters. Every life taken became fuel for vengeance. In the ruins of Chicago, a young woman who had lost her family to Alpha fire picked up a rifle for the first time. She led a squad of survivors, striking Alpha patrols night after night. Her name spread like wildfire through resistance channels. She became a symbol of defiance. She was not alone. Across the world, ordinary people became warriors, driven by loss but united by something greater: hope. And then came the moment that truly turned the tide. In orbit, the humans managed to hijack an Alpha warship. It was small compared to the massive fleets, but it was intact. Engineers and hackers worked day and night, learning its systems, studying its weapons. For weeks, smoke poured from hidden bases as they rebuilt the ship, welding human technology with alien power. When it finally rose into the sky, painted with human symbols, it was more than just a warship. It was proof. Proof that the Alphas were not invincible. The humans renamed it Defiance. With the Defiance leading the way, human forces launched coordinated strikes across the planet. For the first time, Alpha ships were not just destroyed by luck or traps, but by organized human firepower. Entire patrol fleets fell. Supply lines collapsed. Even Alpha commanders began to whisper, "They are learning." The turning tide was not only in battle, but in spirit. Humanity, once fractured by nations and borders, stood as one. They fought not for power, not for conquest, but for survival and freedom. That unity became their greatest weapon. An Alpha soldier captured after a failed patrol was asked what frightened him most about the humans. His answer was simple: "You fight as if death is nothing. We kill 1 and 10 rise. We burn your cities and you use the ashes as weapons. You are endless." The galaxy trembled at those words. The Alphas, once considered unstoppable, were bleeding in ways they had never bled before. Their fleets were still vast, their soldiers still terrifying, but for the first time they were uncertain. And uncertainty was a poison that spread quickly. On Earth, the resistance carved their motto into the ruins of every battlefield: "We bleed. We burn, but we never yield." The Alphas had thought themselves predators, the top of all chains. But now, for the first time in their long reign, they began to wonder, had they awakened something greater? The tide of war was turning, and humanity, scarred and battered, was beginning to rise from the shadows into the light of victory. The Alphas had once ruled with iron claws and burning skies. To the galaxy they seemed eternal, unbreakable, undefeatable, the predators at the top of all chains. But now whispers of fear spread even among their own soldiers. For the first time in history, the Alphas were losing. It began with small cracks in their empire. Human raids destroyed their supply lines. Resistance fighters struck convoys carrying food and fuel. Alpha soldiers who once marched proudly now starved in their camps. Entire garrisons disappeared into forests and tunnels, never returning. And then came the moment the galaxy would never forget: the Battle of the Atlantic. Alpha fleets moved to crush the growing human navy, bringing hundreds of ships to the ocean skies. They expected a quick slaughter. Instead, they faced the Defiance and dozens of human-built warships rising from hidden bases. With hacked Alpha cannons and weapons fueled by human ingenuity, the Resistance launched a storm of fire. For hours, the battle raged across the waves. Explosions lit the night, fire rained into the sea, and wreckage fell like burning comets. Human ships fell one by one, but they fought with a fury that shocked the galaxy. At the height of the battle, the Defiance rammed an Alpha dreadnought, splitting it apart in a fireball that shook the skies. When dawn came, the unthinkable had happened. The Alpha fleet was gone. The ocean carried only wreckage, and humanity, scarred and bloodied, still stood. The fall of the Alphas had begun. Across the world, uprisings spread like wildfire. In Asia, resistance armies stormed Alpha command posts using captured weapons against their masters. In Africa, tribes and militias united, striking together in massive coordinated waves. In South America, guerrilla groups emerged from the jungles, cutting down retreating Alpha soldiers with ruthless precision. The galaxy watched with wide eyes. For centuries, they had known the Alphas as monsters too powerful to resist. Now, for the first time, they saw those monsters running. On distant worlds under Alpha chains, slaves began to rise. Alien workers threw down their tools, whispering, "If humans can fight, so can we." Entire mining colonies revolted, ambushing Alpha guards and seizing ships. The fire of rebellion spread beyond Earth, reaching every corner of the Alpha Dominion. The Alpha High Command grew desperate. They sent their last fleets, their strongest armies, their most ruthless commanders. But the harder they struck, the more they bled. Humans had learned every weakness of their enemy, every blind spot, every flaw in their armor. In the ruins of Moscow, an Alpha general prepared his final stand. He commanded thousands of soldiers, armored and armed with the deadliest weapons. He believed the humans would break at last. But when the battle came, his forces were surrounded, not by one army, but by thousands of ordinary men and women. Farmers, students, workers, soldiers, all carrying the fire of resistance. The general fought until his last breath, but in the end he fell, his body lying among the ruins he once thought he owned. His death marked the breaking point. The Alpha Empire collapsed from within. Ships mutinied. Commanders abandoned their posts. Soldiers threw down their weapons and fled into the void. What was once the most feared force in the galaxy became scattered fragments, hunted and despised, and humanity did not stop. They pursued the Alphas across stars, across planets, across the ashes of their empire. For every city burned on Earth, an Alpha world was taken. For every child lost, an Alpha fleet was destroyed. Humanity had no mercy left. One Alpha leader, cornered on a dying world, asked a human commander, "Why do you fight with such endless fury?" The human's reply was cold and simple. "Because you thought we would kneel." The end of the Alphas came quietly, not with a grand battle, but with silence. Their great fleet, once enough to darken suns, was gone. Their fortresses, once symbols of terror, lay in ruins. Their banners, once feared across the galaxy, were buried under rubble. The hunters had become the hunted, and in their final hours, the Alphas realized the truth that the galaxy had already whispered. Humans did not yield. Humans did not bow. Humans did not break. The Alphas had believed themselves eternal, but eternity ended on Earth. The war was over. The skies that once burned with Alpha fire were clear again. Their fleets had been torn apart, their generals slain, their empire shattered. What was once a force of terror feared by billions had been wiped from existence. The Alphas, who had called themselves rulers of all life, were now nothing more than dust and memory. On Earth, the ground was still scarred. Cities lay in ruins and countless graves stretched across the land. Humanity had paid a terrible price. Yet even in that pain they stood tall. They had not only survived, they had won. The galaxy waited in silence. For centuries, every race had lived in the Alpha's shadow. They had bowed, surrendered, or been broken. Now they watched Earth, uncertain and afraid. Would the humans, victorious and furious, become a new empire of conquerors? Or would they choose something else? The answer came not in threats, but in a message. From the ruins of New York, rebuilt into a beacon of resistance, humanity broadcast across the stars. The words were simple, spoken by a soldier whose uniform was torn, whose voice carried both sorrow and fire. We bleed. We burn, but we never yield. That phrase echoed through every corner of the galaxy. It was carved into the ruins of Alpha strongholds, painted on human ships, whispered in the streets of alien cities. It was not just a victory cry, it was a warning and a promise. The warning was clear. Humanity would never be slaves. Any who tried to chain them would face the same fate as the Alphas. The promise was stronger still. Humanity would fight not only for themselves, but for all who wished to be free, and the galaxy listened. On distant mining worlds, alien slaves broke their chains, shouting human words as they struck down their masters. On forgotten planets, rebels raised human banners, fighting in the shadows with new courage. For the first time in generations, hope spread farther and faster than fear. The humans became more than just a race. They became a symbol. Stories of their struggle passed from world to world. Children on alien planets played games, pretending to be human fighters standing against impossible odds. Elders told tales of Earth, the world that bled but did not bow. Even those who had never seen a human felt their fire. For the Alphas, there was nothing left. Their name, once spoken with fear, became a curse. To call someone Alpha was to call them arrogant, doomed to fall. Their ruins became monuments of warning, places where survivors gathered to remember the price of pride. But for humans, the victory was not only about revenge. It was about proving something greater. They were fragile compared to the Alphas. They had no claws, no armored skin, no glowing eyes. And yet they had something stronger. They had will. That will turn rubble into weapons. That will turn shadows into soldiers. That will carry them through fire and death until the predators who called themselves Alpha were gone forever. In time, human ships left Earth, not as conquerors, but as messengers. They reached alien worlds not to demand kneeling, but to offer hands of friendship. To the enslaved, they brought freedom. To the broken, they brought hope. To the galaxy, they brought a message that would never be forgotten. Stand, fight, endure. You are never as weak as they say. Some feared humanity's rise, but most celebrated it. For if even fragile humans could destroy the mightiest empire the galaxy had ever seen, then perhaps no chain was truly unbreakable. Years later, survivors of the war stood before a monument built from the wreckage of Alpha ships. At its base, carved in dozens of languages, were the words that had carried humanity through the darkest hours. We bleed. We burn, but we never yield. The galaxy called it the message of Earth. It was not just the end of the Alphas. It was the beginning of something new. From that day on, whenever tyrants rose and shadows stretched across the stars, rebels and warriors would whisper the same promise over and over, until the galaxy shook once more. Remember the humans, for they had proven the greatest truth of all. Strength does not come from claws or ships or fear. Strength comes from the heart that refuses to kneel. And so the story of Earth, scarred but unbroken, spread across the stars like fire. The humans were no longer prey. They were no longer fragile. They were no longer overlooked. They were the will that could not be broken, and the galaxy would never forget it.